Tariff.
You're not looking at the unemployment numbers.
You better read the numbers.
I'm asking a question. It's
We're
not
almost
saying
at full
anything.
employment. We're almost at full. What are you talking about?
And people who say things like, oh, well, it's short-term pain, are always the people who never have to suffer the short-term pain. For the people out there who are consumers, they are going to suffer from this. And Walmart, if I can just finish,
if
Walmart.
you're inside the Trump bubble and you're on Twitter with all the bros, it hits hard. It's really good.
That's not what the numbers say. The number one destination for invested capital on earth is still over 50% in America. Tonight.
Hey, how's it going? My name's Jasmine. I also go by Jizzy Creams. I've been called Jizzy Creams since the 3rd grade. And today's episode on Abby Phillip, we're going to be talking about tariffs. Now, I don't know about you, but I am not a huge fan of tariffs. They've been causing all kinds of problems up in here. But, all right, let's get to it.
Tariff takedown. A federal court just ruled that President Trump does not have the authority to impose his sweeping tariffs. That means the bulk of the levies are now at a standstill, including the ones he announced on so-called Liberation Day last month. It also prevents Trump from enforcing the tariffs he placed earlier this year against China, Mexico, and Canada that were designed, according to him, to combat fentanyl coming into the United States. Now, Trump implemented these tariffs without Congress, invoking the International Emergency Powers Act, which gives the president the authority to act in response to an unusual or extraordinary threat. But the 3-judge panel at the U.S. Court of International Trade found that's illegal. Stock futures are surging tonight on the heels of that ruling. The Trump administration is also now vowing to appeal. This is a really big deal for the trade moment that we are in, and I'm honestly surprised that it has taken this long to get to this court. A couple things you should know. This court has the jurisdiction over this issue, which is international trade. The second thing is that they are simply saying the Constitution is super clear. Congress is responsible for this. Not only is Congress responsible for this, but Congress went back to the law multiple times to say, you can't do whatever you want in this sphere. This is our responsibility. So this is a huge blow, Kevin.
Yeah, except it's not over. I mean, a lot of what Trump is doing is chaotic in the sense that courts block him and then he goes back and appeals it. What he's trying to do is send out a signal, we need reciprocal tariffs, equivalent of a VAT tax, consumer tax that other countries have. This is going to obviously be applauded by markets that are saying this is a stay of action. And so it's going to be a longer negotiation, but I don't think the game's over at all. He's going to appeal it. I think half the country believes that this is a good strategy.
Is this a game? Is this the country loving a strategy of a game? Or is this like our economy and our people's livelihoods?
Trump has never let the courts decide his narrative. In this case, I don't know how long the delay is. He's going to keep going.
Narrative, but then there's also the law. So I don't know. I mean, I don't think narrative wins out when the courts say it's illegal.
Yeah, I think the question for me becomes if the
When has he ever listened to the courts, though? I'm surprised Abby's even saying that.
administration was close to finalizing a deal with India. I was hoping that would come in the next week or two. We appear to see some potential movement with China as well. It sort of puts those things in limbo. I certainly understand what the court ruled, and I wouldn't necessarily disagree with what Congress been able to sort of dictate these sort of tariff negotiations, but I do think Trump's overall argument about reciprocal tariffs is pretty spot on. With that said, I wonder if this does go back to Congress, Republicans control the House and Senate, will they then in turn give the president the leeway to try to finalize some of these deals? I'd like to see
They
that.
could do it right now.
Yeah, no, they could.
That seems highly unlikely. They should have done that from the start. This is yet another L for the Trump administration. You have both houses of Congress. You knew all along this wasn't an emergency. In fact, he's kind of sort of admitted already that this wasn't an emergency. It was a ploy to try and negotiate a better trade deal for Americans, to try to bring workers back into factories, but apparently robots are going to be doing the work. This is a huge L, Kevin. It seems appropriate to acknowledge it at this point. I remember you suggesting at some point in a long Twitter stream that this was a ploy and that there was going to be some short-term pain, but we'd have some immediate benefits at some point. And this doesn't really seem to be
Doesn't
materializing.
solve the narrative. In India, charging 110% tariffs on car parts made in America, and we charge 3%.
But we're not fixing the problem now.
Well, I think that's why, at the end of the day, this game isn't over. I think a reciprocal tariff or a reduction of all tariffs, which are the two outcomes, is still on the table. I don't think Trump's going to stop just because of this ruling. He's not going to wake up tomorrow morning and say, oh, forget the tariffs.
Wait, what do you think he's going to do? What do you think he's going to do? Wait, what do you think he's going to do? You think he's just going to ignore the courts and
No, he
just
still has a majority
levy
mandate. Let's not forget
tariffs?
that. If you're telling him through this ruling, he's got to go.
Trump, Donald's like a little toddler. He's going to throw a fit until he gets his way, or if he finds some kind of scheming way to get to it. I mean, I don't know why Abby's acting like, oh, he obeys the laws.
Congress, he'll go to Congress, where he does have majority mandate.
Right.
For at least the next 18 months.
I'm not sure that he has a majority to levy global tariffs on the entire world, least of all ones that are over 100% in some cases. Otherwise, I think he would have done it by now. That's the part of the problem.
Yeah, it shows how unserious this is. They've been not on the same accord since they announced this. At first, like you said, it was because of fentanyl, which, by the way, 86% of cases brought from fentanyl crossing the border are from U.S. citizens. Then it was, a punishment to Canada and China. And
that is very true. I cannot tell you how many arguments I've gotten into with people saying, oh, immigrants bring in drugs, fentanyl and stuff. And I'm always like, that's Americans, doofus.
even Peter Navarro, a former member of his administration, they could not get on the same page. Right now, revenue is not supposed to outweigh the cost of goods, and that's what's happening. And that price will pass on to the consumer. And people who say things like, oh, well, it's short-term pain, are always the people who never have to suffer the short-term pain. For the people out there who are consumers, they are going to suffer from this. And Walmart, if I can just finish, Walmart.
That is so true. People who don't have to suffer from it are like, oh, it's just going to be a little bit of pain for a little while. But if it was them that had to suffer that pain, oh, all hell would break loose. It'd be a whole horse of another color in that case.
They not suffer, but small businesses are. I think of people like Melissa Butler, who you are certainly familiar with, who runs the Lip Bar. She's going to be directly impacted by these tariffs, and that's going to impact workers and even some of the people who voted for him. This is yet another example of how grossly unserious it is. Even when they had the plan that they were going to negotiate 70 countries in 90 days, assuming all these countries had the same purchasing power, is an embarrassment on the global stage yet again.
It was interesting that earlier today, Donald Trump was asked about how markets have been reacting to his tariff moves, and they've been calling it the taco trade. Trump always chickens out because he starts with a really high number and then backs down. And here's how Trump responded to that.
Wall Street analysts have coined a new term called the taco trade. They're saying Trump always chickens out on your tariff threats, and that's why markets are higher this week. What's your response to that?
I kick out?
Chicken out.
Oh,
Insults, insults, insults. What else? I mean, what else is new? That's all he does. He's just going to insult and watch.
Chicken out. I've never heard that. We had a dead country. We had a country people didn't think it was going to survive, and you ask a nasty question like that.
Negativity, negativity, then insults and negativity, then insults, and then I did great, and this is the problem, and I have the answer. I'm so sick of it. I'm so sick of it.
It's just so disgraceful. I think that is so embarrassing that an American president demeans journalists like that, and he does it all of the time with impunity, and he damages the American brand. He damages our country. He damages the office. I don't know what his end game is with that. I think he's just so empty. He has to beat everybody down around him, but that is unpresidential. That is so despicable that he speaks to journalists like that.
So look, I think if you look at...
That's a good point too. Like, what is his end game? I mean, obviously he doesn't have one because he's not that advanced, but...
The markets for the past couple of months now, let's say the past 30, 45 days. For the most part, the market has shown resilience. You look at some of our biggest companies, tech companies, NVIDIA came out today. They outperformed the...
He literally just said, today. Today, Junior.
Street. I think we'll hear from Costco, I believe, Thursday. That will give us an indication whether or not consumers continue to spend at a pretty optimum level. You look at unemployment rates, those numbers continue to be low. So regardless of your views on tariffs, for the most part, the overall strength of the economy and all of the indicators that we would measure appear to be pretty strong. And I think to give the president some room to have some better trade deals, negotiations with some of our major allies, I don't think, Abby, that's a bad thing at all. And I think most Americans would appreciate it.
I think the point that
First of all, yes, our economy, the U.S.'s economy, is pretty resilient. We've learned that after the pandemic. But he is completely wrong. That's totally false to say unemployment isn't doing bad, because out of everything in our economy, like GDP, unemployment, inflation, stock market, unemployment is doing the worst. I believe it's risen to like 4.2%, which is the highest since November of 2024. And, you know, the concerns that recent tariff announcements may dampen hiring in the coming months doesn't even give us hopes for it getting any better anytime soon. So I don't know why he keeps brushing it off like it's nothing. That's like in serious deep water, if anything.
The reporter is making by asking the question is that all those things that you mentioned, a large part of it is that Trump actually just backed down from his initial threat. When he starts off with China at 145%, he says, well, China's willing to talk to us now, so we're going to go down to 30%. There's no substantial deal with China. The EU starts at 50%, then he's like, oh, they're going to talk to us now. We're going to go down to 10%. The markets then say, okay, great.
But the EU signaled that they didn't want to have discussions with the US.
I get that.
That's a fact.
They are signaling that they want to talk to Trump at some point. They have not given him anything. I mean, so that's called backing down.
So you guys are okay with China ripping off our IP, stealing our products, not giving us access to their markets?
Concerned, but
you're good with that? You're okay with that?
I think there are plenty of things that ought to be done with respect to China. I think the tariff regime that they have imposed on the United States is decidedly unfair. We could talk about all of the other various criminal things that are going on there.
I don't think tariffs have anything to do with China.
But the actual issue here is that Trump had a particular gambit that he tried, and it failed miserably. And it's a mistake to focus narrowly on the stock market and its performance and whether or not it seems to be in an okay place. People lost their jobs. There were material consequences because of a severe disruption. I'm not sure what percentage. I'm not sure what percentage there. We're talking numbers. Well, here's the question. What percentage of job loss is fine and okay when the president of the United States, when the president of the United States,
we're almost at job employment. What are you talking about? There's no job loss in America.
One at a time.
There's no job loss in America.
Hold on a second.
What are you talking about?
Let me ask a question.
We're at full
employment. Is the claim that there have been absolutely no jobs lost because of the disruptions created by the tariff?
Have you not looked at the unemployment numbers?
You better read the numbers. No, I'm asking a question. It's not saying anything.
We're almost at full employment. We're almost at full. What are you talking about?
That's what Trump was handing.
That's an evasion, Kevin.
What world is Kevin living in? See, that's another benefit that the very wealthy have, is that they can live in a world where they can live their own truth. Whatever they don't want and do want to be true, they can afford to have that true in their world, which is a selfish thing to do, and it would be the worst choice to make. But I mean, Kevin's he lives a very comfy life. He's got plenty of money. Shermichael, I don't know how rich he is, but he's definitely on Trump's side too. So of course they're the only two that are strongly supporting this. But it's bad for, if you're not a billionaire, or at least like Kevin's is, I think he has $500 million. If you don't have $500 million and up, then this is going to be completely awful for you.
He was handed. He's doing
the economy's on fire.
He's doing
what are you talking about?
To the American economy. Nobody is taking us.
What is this job loss? The economy.
Also, to be fair, a lot of things that you would think are doing really, really bad right now, surprisingly, are still kind of doing well. They're keeping afloat. Like I believe that, for example, the stock market in May, it did pretty well. I think it performed well. But I think like investor optimism is tempered by concerns over the tariffs and inflation and labor market weakness, all of that stuff. So it's definitely on eggshells right now.
It's on fire.
The economy is doing okay.
Damage to the American brand. We are a laughing stock. We're a laughing stock in Europe, a laughing stock in Asia. If you're inside the Trump bubble and you're on Twitter with all the bros, it hits hard. It's really good.
That's not what the numbers say. The number one destination for invested capital on earth is still over 50% in America. Tonight, right now. So I don't know what you're talking about for a laughing stock. The money pours in. Trillions of dollars comes to America. Why? Best place to invest on earth.
Largest consumer economy.
I think, Kevin, you're making a great, you're making a great argument for why.
Because I'm right.
Well, hold on. For why the economy, even as you just explained it, is doing just fine. And Trump is trying to make the argument that the United States is on the verge of collapse, and that's why tariffs are necessary. I know, but my point is that Trump is arguing that these tariffs are necessary because the economic destruction that is caused by the current state of affairs in the country warrants them. You're just making the argument that the economy is on fire. We're at full employment. Yeah. Everything is going well. And you're right.
And what exactly
has
the
undermined Trump's argument from the beginning. But one of the things when we talk about what's happening with tariffs going forward is really where the economists and the Fed, what they're looking at. The International Labor Organization said the global impacts of tariffs, if they go into effect, which they really haven't because he keeps backing down, is 7 million jobs lost globally. Okay, so that's that. The Fed just today said the job market is likely to weaken substantially on Trump's tariffs. Again, if they go into effect. But the reason we're sitting here talking about no effects is because Trump keeps backing down. That's why the taco trade is happening.
If maybe the Fed chair also said 2 months ago that we would probably be in a recession right now. And all the numbers showcase, once again, the economy is still strong and resilient. I think you can use tariffs up to a point as an economic strategy to negotiate. Many economists would agree with that up into a point. And as long as you don't cross over a certain threshold, I would want to give the president, Abby, as I stated, a little bit of room with our biggest partners and even adversaries like China to have a reset. That makes perfect sense to anyone who understands basic economics.
What's so interesting about this moment that we're in is that we started off the day in one place and ended the day with the courts basically saying, actually, that little bit of room doesn't belong to the president. It belongs to the United States Congress because in this country, Congress is responsible for levying taxes on the American people. So we'll see how that one goes forward in the courts. Coming up next.
Okay. First off, let's talk about why tariffs are good to begin with, okay? The protection of domestic industries, right? That means potentially preserving jobs in certain sectors. Encouragement of local consumption, right? Government revenue. So, tariffs generate income for the government, which can be used for public services to reduce deficits. Okay, that sounds great. Let's talk about why they're bad. So higher consumer prices, retaliation and trade wars, and economic inefficiency, and those outweigh the pros big time, like way more. Like she was saying, because at first I was like, why is Abby agreeing with him? But it's because I see what she's saying. It's because the reason why I think the economy is doing really well right now, still surprisingly, is because he keeps backing down. So it's showing that without tariffs, we are doing well, barely hanging on thanks to his threat of tariffs. But everything that could go wrong will go wrong with tariffs. Okay, a collapse is probably the least likely of all these, but still very much a reality. And what's keeping that in check is institutional strength, diversified economy, okay? Isolation, as far as Trump trying to do global isolation, is more likely to happen than collapse, but not as likely as authoritarian drift. So the thing that's keeping it in check from isolation is allies' patience. Thank you to all our allies for having patience with us, and global interdependence. Okay, but the most likely outcome out of all of this would have to be authoritarian economic model. Okay. If it keeps going, it can get to a point of no return. For Trump to fully isolate the U.S., though, it would take a lot of time. It would take massive policy shifts and cooperation from Congress or a complicit judicial branch, which has been fluttering around lately. I think what would trigger an authoritarian economy would be a populist president consolidates power, which he's been doing, politicizes the Fed, attacks independent institutions, and uses economic tools as weapons, like freezing bank accounts, targeting businesses that oppose him, etc. What that would look like is markets tank due to lack of trust, international investors pull out, wealthy Americans move money overseas, and the economy becomes unstable, favoring political allies over sound economic policy. So that could really, that could ruin so much, And just to bring it all to a close, if you're feeling anxious about this, that's not paranoia. That's being well informed. That's informed awareness. But the good news is, the good news is that these outcomes are preventable, especially at this very early stage right now. So these outcomes are preventable, but they require these three things: voting with long-term consequences in mind. okay? Talking honestly about the risks and rejecting political fatalism, okay? I've been doing so much research on it, and okay, it's not as scary as I thought, but I mean, depending on his next few moves, like the next few moves of Congress and Donald, it could get pretty extreme. I mean, it could get bad. Oh, and to go off of that, you know, about a recession, I wanted to play a video for you guys.
Do you think it is likely that the United States will dip into a recession because of President Trump's tariffs?
I think that right now we are at a decision-making point and very close to a recession. And I'm worried about something worse than a recession if this isn't handled well. A recession is 2 negative quarters of GDP, and whether it goes slightly there, we always have those things. We have something that's much more profound. We have a breaking down of the monetary order. We are going to change the monetary order because we cannot spend the amounts of money, so we have that problem. And when we talk about the dollar and we talk about tariffs, we have that. We are having profound changes in our domestic order, how ruling is existing, and we're having profound changes in the world order. Such times are very much like the 1930s. I've studied history, and this repeats over and over again. So if you take tariffs, if you take debt, if you take the rising power challenging the existing power, if you take those factors and look at the factors, those changes in the orders, the systems, are very, very disruptive. How that's handled could produce something that is much worse than a recession, or it could be handled well.
You see? And I think that's a very important point to make. But all right, that's all for now. That's all I've got for now. Please like and subscribe. And I'm going to be doing plenty more of these Abby Phillip sessions or segments. Yeah, hope you like it. I'll see you next episode.
They got your data, dumbass.
Do not come. Do not come.